So what we have here today is what's going to be my vanity top for my bathroom. Took a walnut slab. Obviously we're doing the river look here with this. Going with a black kind of metallic kind of look with that inside of it too. It's not really noticeable probably on camera, but basically this was part of a cutoff along with this, but this has this cool little section here, so I wanted to kind of integrate that into this, and I figured this is going to be too big of a mouth, so I wanted to kind of put something here. So probably going to do the last pour for this today. You can kind of see we're getting close to the top here. This is about 1¼ inch, 1 3/8 thick, and it's about, I think I've done 7 pours with this, just really small ones. I didn't want to go too thick and have it crack or run into bubbles and issues like that. So this has been going really well so far, so I'm hoping it stays that way with the last pour. And basically what I'm gonna do right now is just kind of scuff up the surface. I've just got blocks. I've used sandpaper too. This is like a 150 180 220 kind of block. It's just to kind of rough up the surface, so that way when the next layer goes on, it kind of has something to grab onto. I generally use my mask, so here we go. Alright, so basically I just kind of roughed it up, as you can kind of see. I'll run the towel over it just to kind of get some of the bigger stuff off. And then after that, I like using a tack cloth just to kind of get up the rest of any of the leftovers. You want this to be pretty clean, obviously, because the next pour, like I said, hopefully it's going to be the last one. I'm going to up the amount that I've been doing 24 to 32 ounce pours depending on the mixing cups that I have, and that's generally been about 1/8 to not quite 1/4 inch of cover basically for each pour. I started with 2 gallons of epoxy, and I have about ½ gallon left right now. So it's been quite a bit of epoxy. So I kind of fast forwarded here a little bit, did some mixing, so you weren't bored just watching me turn this leftover piece of plywood inside of a cup of black goo. You can see it's really uniform now. You'll see the top of this one, you can see some of the bubbles there, and that's fine. I'll do a last little kind of turn on this. Just want to make sure the sides are good. Oh, looks pretty. I'm going to kind of clear off the stick. I'm going to let this sit here for a little bit. Like I mentioned, those bubbles, they're going to come to the surface, and that's fine. So, as you can kind of see, let me see if I can get this closer. Down some. You can see some of the bubbles in the top here. This is a Wagner heat gun. 2 speeds to it. Some people use heat guns, some people use a torch. I've used a torch before. Sometimes in some of the angles they needed to get to, the torch would kind of burn itself out, or because the angle of it wasn't getting gas, so it would just shut itself off. So I just went ahead and got a heat gun. It's like, I think 30 bucks or something. I don't know. You can get them at every orange or blue big box store, or even the other Wally World place. But anyways, you can kind of see some of the bubbles in the top here. What the heat gun does is once it's heated up, you can kind of look in there and you can watch the bubbles just kind of go away. And that's going to work the same for when we go over to the to do the pours. I'll do a quick one usually after I let this sit for a minute or two. I don't know if that's recommended or not. It's worked for me, but because bubbles are your biggest enemy basically when you're doing epoxy. So I'm gonna go get this set up over by the table before we do our pour, but we're about ready to go. So what I've done here is basically I've got my 2 mixing cups. I'm gonna do a shot of little bubbles there before I do a pour. Something I did off camera also was made sure that this was level. Obviously I want this to be as level as possible, so when we do the pour, because it's self-leveling stuff, that it kind of all goes flat, or as flat as possible. If it goes over the edge, it's not the end of the world, because basically I'm going to be planing this down at the end of the day anyway, so it doesn't really matter. Like this part here actually sticks up a little higher, just the way that it was a piece that cupped up some. So again, this is all going to be kind of flattened out. So if this goes over the edge, that's fine. It's actually a good thing, because that means I'll have more surface that I can flatten out. So I'm going to start from this side and just kind of make it even. Still have a good 6 ounces here. I really don't want to manipulate it too much. You can kind of see that there's swirls in here, and you know, I want it to be as natural, so to speak, as possible when it comes to that. A little more here. Fill that in some. Like that. Where the heat gun comes in. Let it warm up. Probably can't see it, but there are some really small bubbles here. And as you go like this, you can kind of move the epoxy a little bit. I don't know if you can see that on camera or not. So if you wanted to add a little extra, you can like that. I'm not seeing an abundance of bubbles, which is a good thing. Like I said, that's what I want. So here we are. You can kind of see the swirls a little better on this, with this being over the top of it, and a little bit of the metallic in there. You can see it's kind of over the edge here, which is, like I said, that's what we're looking for. A little more on this side. And this is like that little spill off river that's kind of cool looking. It kind of looks like you can see there's the lip there, and then part of that's going to get planed down, like I said. We're over here. Like I said, that's completely fine, because I'm taking off a good 1/8 to 1/4 inch off the top of this to make it all planed to the same level. But you can see the swirls from the metallic. And remember, this is just a black dye with a white metallic, so I actually thought it would be more gray when I first started, but it's it just looks like shiny black. So it's been about 15 minutes, and I did want to back up to something about bubbles. On your early pours, what generally is recommended is surfaces that are going to have the epoxy. It's good to do your first brush on, basically, to where you just mix up a small amount of epoxy. You don't have to color it or anything, it can be clear. And you'll basically just take like a paintbrush and just kind of make that surface, coat it with a thin coat of epoxy. Basically what happens is that a dry surface on the wood, and if you put the epoxy on there, as the wood absorbs it, air bubbles come out. Since this over poured onto uncoated surfaces, you can see little sections like right here with bubbles, as you can see right there. And that's where the heat gun kind of comes in. And it should make those go away, even if they are. There you go. So, in conclusion, this is about an hour after the initial pour. You can see, remember I mentioned the self-settling situation. You can see it's all the way over here now. It's all the way over here. Like I said, that's what I wanted, so that's good. So this is the overall final pour. Now we just wait for it to completely dry, like 8 to 12 hours or so. In other words, I'll just kind of come back to this tomorrow to make sure the whole thickness of the pour is done, hardened, I should say. And then from there, I'll take it out of the mold here, and then get it set up to start planing. I'll probably have some more videos going on to that. We'll call this part 1, so to speak, for this project. Thanks for watching. This is my first real video doing woodwork stuff, so don't judge me. And I hope this turns out great.